Thank you so much for registering for the webinar today. Hopefully, everyone will walk away with a little piece of information that you didn't know prior. Um, we will also feel free to put your comments or questions in the chat, and we will have a Q&A at the end. Um, and then also at the end, we will have a QR code that will give you a free ebook to be able to download that will help you what to look for when you're evaluating your cybersecurity strategy. So that's just sort of a little freebie for your attendance today. So we'll go ahead and get started. Um, Today's webinar is Boost Your Business Essential IT Tips and Tricks. Who we are. Um, I'm Rebecca Heaton. I am a managing partner of Trumbull Tech. I am a current SCORE mentor. Um, I have had IT industry experience prior to this, and also I had my own accounting business for over 20 years, working with a lot of small businesses. So I had definitely have that passion for small business and entrepreneurs. And when I met Dave, Dave Bloom, my partner, he had the experience of high-level enterprise IT experience, and so we kind of came together with his enterprise knowledge of IT and my passion for small business, and we formed our business to really kind of have that outreach for a very underserved market for that 1 to 30 user small business. So that's a little bit about us. Today's presenter, we are excited to welcome Elmer Robinson. He's part of our team. He's a CISSP, and basically, it's a lot of acronyms for he's a Microsoft certified professional, he's a certified network engineer, and he's also been a director of cybersecurity at one of Wyoming's largest MSPs. He has over 35 years of experience in the industry. He's also a Microsoft certified professional and has been instrumental in ensuring the smooth operations of IT systems. He has had his CISSP, which is a Certified Information Systems Security Professional. Don't say that too many times quickly, for 14 years as a gold standard certification holder. So we welcome Elmer and look forward to his knowledge and expertise today. Thank you, Elmer.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that introduction. We're here to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, and cybersecurity has quite a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, I think, particularly in the small business marketplace. So, we're here today to kind of help you guys get your hands around that. And we're going to begin by helping you understand the nature of the threats, what cyber threats look like in today's day and age. And then we're going to talk about some tools for you, some best practices, some hands-on nuts and bolts type of things that you can do to help secure your small business and improve, your threat envelope. And we're going to talk then about protecting your customer data and what that looks like. And cloud applications are really taking over and bring their own level of security concerns. So we're going to talk about cloud security and wrap up with enough time to give you guys the opportunity to ask questions and do a little bit of Q&A. So moving forward, there is a big disconnect these days, particularly in the small business community, with regards to the nature of the cybersecurity threat. Enterprise executives really get it. They list cybersecurity as their single biggest risk. But small business owners tend to be, quote, not very concerned about cybersecurity when polled. And a survey by Nationwide Insurance Company showed 40% of small business owners thought a cyber attack was going to cost less than $1,000. And 60% think it would be less than 3 months to fully recover. Back in the day, a cyber threat looked like you click on a link, a bunch of screens pop up, laughing skeletons talk about hackers' rules. and you knew right away you had done something wrong. And in that day and age, your computer guy could grab your computer, do a wipe and a reinstall, get it back to you the next day, and you could kind of move on down the road. Right? But that's not what this looks like at all anymore. And the truth is that IBM does a study every year. They publish a report called the cost of a data breach, and they've done this for decades now. So we not only know the actual cost of a cyber attack, but we've known it for a long, long time, and we've watched it change over time. And right now, the IBM cost of a data breach report pegs the global average cost for a cyber breach at $4.4 million. In the USA, we get off worse than most. Our average cost is $9.4 million. And if you're in the healthcare industry, your average cost to get out of a cyber breach exceeds $10 million. And so in the face of those kind of staggering numbers, 60% of small businesses will fail outright within 6 months of a cyber attack. Only 40% of small businesses will still exist, will survive 1 year after a cyber attack, because the costs to remediate the breach is in the millions of dollars. And it's not going to happen in a short period of time. It's going to take many months, maybe years. And during that time, you're going to lose clients, you're going to lose revenue, you're going to have direct costs in bringing in professionals to mitigate the breach and to solve the problem for you. And after it's all done, your customers are going to go somewhere else because of the damage to your reputation. And so this is an existential threat, right? This is no longer a question of productivity or convenience. It's not a question of how long before my IT guy brings my computer back to me. So this is now a question of, will we survive this or not? And in truth, you're never really too small to be a target. This is one of the pervasive beliefs in the small business community. You know, they hear about Walmart getting hit and they think, yeah, of course, they're huge. They'll never come after me. You know, why would the bad guys care about me? Truth is, the bad guys don't care about you at all. They don't know who you are and they would never know who you are. But the fact is, you have an email address, and everybody has an email address. And overwhelmingly, the primary attack vector these days is phishing emails. And so that means anybody that has an email address is really a target. And so you, all of your employees, it doesn't matter the size of your business. The bad guys throw a gigantic net that scoops up everybody, big and small alike. And so looking at the statistics, you know, we can see right here in front of us that the big blue part of the pie is user credentials. You know, the overwhelming majority, 85% of the time, a data breach is because the bad guys obtained credentials either by purchasing them straight off of the dark web, or they were able to infiltrate the network as a result of a phishing email where someone clicked and gained them intrusion into the network. So those techniques work so flawlessly that most of the time the bad guys don't even try anything else. So that is overwhelmingly the attack vector. And so once again, the threat is, do you have email? Because if you have email, if you have ever created an online account with LinkedIn or Yahoo or Facebook or Target or Walmart or, you know, Amazon, anytime that you've done any of those things, you've created an exposure for yourself that's just as large as say any other person. And then the 12% that we see, kind of the second biggest wedge, it says hidden IT risks. So these are mistakes being made. These are the things that would get fixed if we knew about them. These are out of date antivirus definitions. These are security patches that are missing because the computer hasn't been rebooted in a while. These are weak, blank, insecure passwords that are, sitting on administrative accounts that, we would disable or change if we knew about them. So these are the things that IT would fix if they knew they were there, but they don't know they're there. The bad guys know they're there, and they leverage these things all day, every day. So it's really easy, a matter of a couple of clicks for them to use holes that exist within your environment to move laterally, to explore the environment, to find the data, and to steal everything. So the truth is, most businesses believe that they're protecting themselves against this threat when they invest in antivirus software and a firewall. The truth is that antivirus and a firewall protect you against that sliver labeled other, the 3%. That breaks out into 0-day attacks and malware attacks, and it's the smallest piece of the pie. So that's what your firewall and your antivirus software are protecting you against, the 3% other. The other 97% you're not being protected against. And so we'll take a look at the next slide, and we can see, I'm sorry, that's one too far. We can see in this slide a representation of that. Not to get into the weeds, but this is actually what's known as the cybersecurity framework that's published by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST framework. And this is a foundational framework. It really serves as the basis for every compliance framework that exists, like HIPAA compliance in the healthcare industry, PCI compliance, the payment card industry, for credit card companies that take credit cards, CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification for companies that are in the Department of Defense supply chain, right? So all of those frameworks are built upon this one, the NIST cybersecurity framework. And it might sound complicated, but it's really easy to get your head around. It's basically 5 columns from left to right. And these represent the progression of a cybersecurity event. Beginning on the left-hand side, they're the steps you take prior to any sort of a cybersecurity event. Beginning with identify. When I walk into the door, the first question I ask a potential client is, how many computers do you have? What kind of sensitive data do you hold? Where does that data live? So identify, that's the nature of that column. And a lot of businesses fail right there, but we don't get any further because those basic questions don't get answered. But moving on, you go to the protect column, right? And as we talked, most businesses end here. They have a firewall and an antivirus, and they believe that's the protection that they need. We saw on the prior slide that only protects you against 3% of threat. And then you'll notice at the top of this, there's a mushroom cloud that separates column 2 and column 3, right? Protect and detect. So the mushroom cloud is the boom event. We call it the boom event. This is when, the employee got the email that said your shipment's late, click here to check the status, and they clicked without thinking about it, and it gave the bad guy entry to the network. And that's the boom event. So the 3 columns to the right of the boom event then are the things you do when it all went wrong, beginning with detect. And you'll notice that column's empty. The fact is that the bad guys have matured to a point where they can live invisibly and undetected in a network without tripping alarms, without setting off antivirus. There was a famous attack in 2020 that was known as the SolarWinds attack. And if you want to be frightened, look at the list of entities that were caught up in the SolarWinds attack. because it's NASA, it's the Pentagon, it's Visa, it's Microsoft, it's all of the biggest cyber frameworks that you could imagine, right? They were breached, and they were breached openly for 6 months as a result of the sonic wall. I'm sorry, the attack, and it was because their software vendor had an update that had malicious code. And so all of these people were customers of SolarWinds. SolarWinds sent out a patch that said, here's your monthly update. And the monthly update contained an entry point for the bad guys. And the story here is not so much that, but the story here is that NASA was openly breached with the bad guys walking in and out the front door for 6 months. And in the end, they never found the breach. Microsoft never found the breach. The Pentagon never found the breach. Those entities were informed of the breach. So the breach was discovered through cybersecurity researchers and other trails of crumbs that led this whole thing to be uncovered. And when it was uncovered, they realized that NASA had been breached for 6 months and didn't know it. And the reason is because the detect column is empty. Like, how do you know when the bad guys are in? If they're in, they got past your antivirus and your firewall. And then what? How do you know? And if you determine they're in, how do you respond? Because the defenses you have in place failed and let the bad guys in. And so what's your response? Who do you call? The police don't come help you with this. So what do you do when you come in Monday morning and you can't get to any of your files and there's a note that says, pay us $1 million in Bitcoins? What's your next step? That's the respond column. And the recover column, it always begins with backups. It should be a lot more than that, but a lot of people fail here as well. Interestingly, there was a study done by IBM looking at cyber breaches and the recovery efforts, and they found that 80% of the companies that got breached and their data got encrypted, they were unable to restore from their backups. So even if they had backups, they were unable to restore from those backups. So that number is 80%. And I'll tell you that I spent the last 40 years of my career as a network guy. And every day I walked in, I felt like my job one was backing up the data. If I couldn't restore when there was a problem, then I was really failing at job one. And yet we've learned from cybersecurity, from the encryption type of breaches that have been going on, that 80% can't restore from backups. So this is really what a modern NIST framework should look like, right? We've got to fill out those columns. Firewall and an antivirus is not enough. Just understanding how many computers you have is not good enough in that identify column. Identity management is the biggest weakness. It's the way the bad guys get in. They're leveraging this all day long, right? And we do generally a bad job of this. Just password hygiene. We'll not have time today to spend a lot of time on password hygiene, but people tend to reuse passwords for secure accounts that just leave them completely vulnerable to the reuse and the credential stumping attacks, as they're known, when credentials are purchased off the dark web because LinkedIn or Facebook got hacked and now they have your password, so they're using it on your PayPal account, which happened this year. And so identity management, managing your username and your password, and multi-factor authentication. right? This is the only way to defeat these remote hackers that have the ability to just launch password attacks against your accounts, especially if they're armed with knowledge about what some of your root passwords look like to begin with. But if you have multi-factor or two-factor authentication enabled so that you have a phone in your pocket and you're going to get a notification with the code and the accounts can't be accessed without that code. So it's important that all of these things be in place just in the first column. And then protection, right? We've already talked about the fact that firewall and antivirus are not nearly adequate. The bad guys walk past those all day long. They represent no obstacle. And it doesn't matter what brand of firewall, it doesn't matter what brand of antivirus, they represent no obstacle. The bad guys lived in NASA's network for 6 months undetected. So those things don't stop the bad guys at all. You have to presume that somebody's going to click the link. You have to assume that a user's going to click a link that contains an embedded link, and then what? How do you protect against that? And the spam filter is really a great option for that. It helps eliminate those dangerous emails from even getting in front of you, right? Secure DNS protects against those clicks. What happens when you click the link? There are technologies that allow you to sandbox that, to take that link, that click, to send it up into a cloud tool that detonates it there, that executes the click and analyzes the results, and make sure that it's safe and legitimate before it allows your click to go through. So all of these things are available these days. And then, of course, patch management. If you're not applying the security updates, most people don't know that every Tuesday, Microsoft releases a whole gigantic pile of security updates that break about half of what they were supposed to fix. And so patch management becomes pretty challenging. It's a requirement. If you're not updating your computers and applying those security patches, then that whole 0-day risk gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so you've got to be applying patches. And yet, how do you do that? When Microsoft's releasing updates, all your application vendors are releasing updates, and it's a constant stream, and you've got multiple computers that have to be kept up to date. And any weak link, right? One hole gives the bad guy entry to your network where everything is available to them. Right. So what happens then? We talked a little bit about sometimes, in spite of the best efforts, there's still a boom event. And Microsoft got hacked, NASA got hacked. What do you do to make sure that they don't live in your environment for 6 months? You don't want somebody knocking on your door like they did at the Pentagon and say, did you know the bad guys are living rent free in your network and have been there for a long, long time? So how do you determine that something's gone wrong? And this is a question that used to be really difficult to answer. For a lot of the solutions were so expensive that you had to have enterprise level pockets in order to solve this problem. But that's really not true anymore. There are really good, sophisticated solutions that gather all the data, all of the behavior data from your environment. You'd be surprised at how many logs and things there are from your Windows, from your firewalls, from your antivirus. All of those things are generating activity logs. And there are services you can get these days that aggregate all of that activity. They monitor it for aberrations that look like threats. They hand that data off to experts who determine if something needs to be investigated and then manage that with local IT so that threats get investigated and not ignored. And the behavior analytics can catch things that got past the antivirus and the normal alarms. And then how do you respond? Like, what if we determine that we've got a breach, we've got a problem, maybe it got away from us and we come in one morning and there's encrypted data? Then how do we respond to that? What is our response like toolkit look like? Do we have solutions that we feel confident that we know in our heart are going to get us through that event? Now we're dealing with, we're dealing with world-class threat actors. Let's be honest about it. There's two categories of threat actors now. There's the nation state threat actor who has unlimited time and resources, and there's the for-profit threat actor who has unlimited time and resources. And so that's who my adversary is. How do I manage that? What if I'm engaged with a live event where my data is encrypted and I need an expert that can get me out the other side of this? Then what are you going to do? Who are you going to call? Do you have cyber insurance that might provide a bit of a safety net here? You might be able to obtain cyber insurance policies that can pay multi-million-dollar payouts if necessary. What's your legal team look like? Again, the police aren't going to help you. Who are you going to call? And then what are the tools that you're going to hand to the experts to perform the recovery, right? Like, do you need to negotiate with the bad guys to see if they're going to give you a decrypt tool? The way this looks now is that you just come in one morning, Monday morning, and you sit down to go to work, and all of your data is inaccessible. And you find a note that says, we've encrypted all of your data and we want $1.4 million deposited in this Bitcoin account. Email us for instructions. And so one option for you would be to restore your encrypted data, to be able to recover your data in a readable format from your backups that everybody's hopefully been doing and testing to make sure they can recover from them. But if you can't, if you're part of the 80-85% that can't even restore from backups, then you might be caught up to where you have to rely on a negotiation with the bad guys. Also, the bad guys, they don't just encrypt your data, they steal your data. So the reason that they spent 6 months in your environment was so they could steal every single thing you have. And once they have every single thing you have in hand, that's when they run the encryption. And even if you restore from your backups and you're able to get your data back so you can continue with your operations, they still have all your data. And they're going to threaten to post all that data publicly on the internet. They're going to post all your secret sauce recipes. They're going to post your financial statements. They're going to post your executive salaries. They're going to post your email where you talk about the body odor of your favorite customer, right? Like, they're going to post all that on the internet. And so you might have to pay anyway, even if you can restore from backups. And in that case, you might need someone who's an expert at negotiating with the bad guys to make sure that the data comes back and to hopefully minimize the price. I can tell you that the encryption tools, when the bad guys run those, work a lot better than the decryption tools. And so even when you pay, even when you write the big check and give them all that they ask for, something like 65% of the time, you'll get your data back, or you'll get 65% of your data back would be a better way to say that. Because if you've got 1.5 terabytes of data that got encrypted over the weekend, the decryption tool might not get all that back right. And so you might lose data, a lot of data, even if you write the big check. And so it's important to do all that you can, given the threat envelope and the nature of today's cybersecurity threats. And we talked a little bit about the fact that, really most of the threat surface comes from email, right? Phishing. I said that everybody's a target that has an email address, and that's the truth. The bad guys have reached a point where it's just child's play for them. It's no more than a couple of clicks. Like they can do this while they're sipping their cup of coffee in one hand and clicking on a mouse with the other hand. They can go to the Wells Fargo website. They can grab the login page with a couple of clicks. They can attach that login page to their malicious emails, and they can email out an email to a million people that says, we're Wells Fargo. There's been a problem with your account. We need you to reset your password. Please click here and reset your password. And then you click that, it goes to a page that looks just like the Wells Fargo page, but it's not. It's the bad guys page. You put in your username and password. They grab that. They throw you to the Wells Fargo page. It looks legit. You have no idea anything happened, right? So that's what this looks like now. There's no alarms. There's no windows popping up. There's no laughing skeletons. There's no indication to you, the user, that anything happened at all. And so how do you stay safe in this? Phishing is a real thing, and it's gone beyond just generic phishing. We talk about spear phishing now. In the early days, you could kind of tell that something didn't smell right with the email, right? The language was a little off, the spelling was a little off, and it didn't necessarily sound like somebody from America wrote the email. And now none of that's true. So the emails are completely legit. There's no visual indication that this is foul in any way. You can take legitimate, like Wells Fargo emails, and set them side by side with the bad guys' emails. They're identical. There's no issue. You're not going to spot a problem email by looking for language or word usage or those kind of things. So you have to really pay attention to what's in the email. Don't click on a link. Really, the bad guys have gotten really good at registering lookalike domains. So, it might not be Amazon.com, right? It might be AMAZ0N.com that looks just like that, but isn't. Or they might have an I or an L stuck in the middle of a couple of L's. So there's 3 instead of 2. And you don't know that when you look at the email and you click on the link. So don't click on the links that's in the email. If it's not something you were expecting, open up a web browser and go to Wells Fargo by typing it into the address bar, right? And, be suspicious, suspect everything. Don't click on the links if you can avoid it at all. Certainly don't download attachments or execute anything. It's possible to put malicious code in graphic files. So just by clicking on a JPEG or a GIF file, you can execute malicious code there. So once again, the way to stay safe is to get some tools that provide click protection and spam filtering. Proofpoint's an excellent product. That's what we use. It really does all of those things very well in a seamless way that doesn't get in front of the user. And so there are other good products out there. Certainly the important point is to make sure that you have some sort of a good filtering solution that provides sandboxing. So, password hygiene, it is such an important thing these days. We have to begin by talking about password reuse. A lot of people in the early days just picked a favorite word to use as their password, and they use that for kind of a basis for all of their passwords. And it doesn't matter whether it's Facebook or whether it's, their bank account or whether it's the local network at work. They use their happy word and some derivation of that as every password they create. But the problem is that Facebook and LinkedIn and Target and Walmart, they get hacked every year. Facebook's been hacked 3 out of the last 4 years and have had hundreds of millions of passwords stolen each time, totaling over $1 billion passwords in the last 3 hacks for Facebook. So any password you've ever used for Facebook is automatically for sale on the dark web, right? And so don't use that password for your network login. Don't use that password for your bank account, right? Don't use that password on accounts that secure important assets. For those kinds of accounts, you've got to use strong passwords that are unique, that have never been used in any cloud-based portal login, right? That aren't used or reused anywhere else. If you're securing your credit card, if you're securing your bank account, you know what? If you've got one-click purchasing turned on Amazon and it only takes a click of a button to charge against your credit card, then the passwords you're using to secure those accounts better be unique. They better be at least 12 characters, right? Not used anywhere else and strong. And so, how do you manage that? If you've got a dozen accounts and I'm telling you, you need 12 to 16 character passwords that are unique and complex, well, you've got to have tools to do that. You need a good password manager that helps you manage the complexity of storing and securing your passwords. We use Keeper. There are many good ones out there. And I would caution you to investigate because there are password managers that have been attacked and breached. So I would do your research on a product that you can feel good about that hasn't been hacked in the past. One of the good reasons we like Keeper. But don't reuse passwords, right? Don't use the same password for multiple accounts and treat garbage accounts like Facebook or Twitter, like these social media accounts. You don't care if that gets hacked, but you care if your bank account password gets hacked. So treat those types of accounts different from each other. You have to understand that they're not the same these days, right? And make sure that you're not using easily guessable information to secure your accounts. And there is a website you can go to. It's called Have I Been Pawned? And the letter A is not present in the word pawned, right? So it's HAVEIBENPWNED. And haveibeenpawned.com will give you the ability to search using your email address to see if your password is for sale on the dark web, right? I recommend everybody do that. And again, the proof is in the pudding this year because there have been 2 acknowledged credential stuffing attacks. One was by PayPal and one was by Norton LifeLock. And they both announced that thousands or millions of accounts had been breached when threat actors purchased their users' passwords off the dark web and then logged into their account using those purchased credentials. So how do you protect against some of those kinds of threats? You know, aside from what we talked about, password hygiene, use multi-factor authentication, sometimes called 2-factor authentication. And this adds an extra layer of security because it requires something you possess in order to get into the account and not just something you know. Because a password is something you know, and that information could be leaked or stolen. But if in order to access a secure account, it sends you a numeric code to a phone or a text message, or you've got an app that creates a changing numeric code and you've got to log in with that code. All of these are ways that you can have an additional layer of security, not just a password, a mechanism that you possess and not just something that's known. And most of your accounts that secure important assets will support multi-factor authentication. It's almost never turned on by default. And so you have to go find it and you have to click the button that turns it on. You have to configure it. You have to pick the type of MFA you want to use. You got to pick the device and configure the device that's going to be used. But it's worth the time. And I would recommend that you enable multi-factor authentication on every single account that supports it, and educate your employees about the importance of using multi-factor authentication. It can really be the difference between being breached and not being breached. And without going into too much of the details, I mentioned earlier the SolarWinds breach that resulted in NASA and Microsoft and the Pentagon being breached without them knowing it, and that they were informed they were breached. Well, that whole event was discovered when an entity that was involved had multi-factor authentication turned on, and they were logging activity in their MFA environment, and they noticed inappropriate activity, and they followed the trail of breadcrumbs until they found out that SolarWinds had been breached, resulting in all those other entities being breached. If that one vendor had not been using MFA, though, NASA and the Pentagon and Microsoft might still not know about it. So we did mention earlier, the updates and the patching. This day and age, there's only about a 3% threat envelope for things like 0-day events and known vulnerabilities resulting from missing patches. But that's because people do a good job for the most part of keeping the updates applied. That threat gets bigger and bigger and bigger if you're not doing a good job of applying updates. And so the antivirus software and the firewall have done a good job of minimizing the threat. But if you're not keeping updates applied, if you don't, if your antivirus software is not up to date, if your firewall is 20 years old, right, and the firmware hasn't been updated since it was installed, if all of those kinds of things are true, then the threat envelope is much bigger than that 3%. Also, the bad guys have such automated tools. Once again, you ask the question, like, how are they going to find me? Like, I'm just one firewall. What if my firmware is out of date? There's a tool called Shogun that the bad guys use, which is essentially a Google search type of a tool that allows a bad guy to type in a string that says, show me all the firewalls from Cisco that have this outdated firmware, and to get a list. So they can query the internet and get a list of devices that are running outdated firmware, that have blank or known passwords. Like, all of that is easily discoverable by the bad guys. To them, it's routine. So make sure that we're at least taking care of the basics, that updates are getting applied, that you've got good solutions for, antivirus solutions that provide multiple levels of protection, and modern firewalls that separate you from your internet connection. I found a lot of businesses don't even have a firewall really that separates them. They believe that the box that their ISP gave them is a firewall, and it's not. And so a good business class firewall needs to be in place, and a good up-to-date antivirus solution as well. And then a solution that makes sure those updates are applied and can alert you when something's not. It's too easy for a computer to need to have been rebooted and not gotten it, and so the updates aren't getting applied, right? So then protecting customer data. Customer data is not just, something that we feel like we should do, right? It's a fiduciary responsibility. We're obligated to protect that data. Not just customer data, employee data. You may have social security numbers that belong to all your employees. You may have credit card numbers and all kinds of bank account information that belongs to your vendors and partners, your customers. So all of that is data that you hold on to. There's a question: if you take credit cards and you apply for PCI certification to be able to accept a credit card, you get asked a question that says, if is your credit card machine connected to your network? Yes or no? If that answer is yes, the question becomes, do you store credit card data on your network? And if that answer becomes yes, then your entire network and everything connected to it has to comply with the full specifications of the PCI compliance. And so, how those things are done makes a real big difference, right? And you're obligated as the business to protect that data and to encrypt it. It's bad enough to tell your customers when you've lost their credit cards, but when you tell your employees that you lost their social security numbers, that affects them for the rest of their life. And so it's critical that you protect this data, and you're obligated to do that. Um, we'll talk a little bit about cloud security because more and more vendors are offering their solutions in the cloud, right? Back in the beginning of time, when you bought Microsoft Office, you got about a 25-pound box of manuals and CDs and discs. Now it's a subscription service and it's a cloud-based product. It might not have anything installed on your local computer at all. It's possible your entire Office 365 environment is just a cloud solution that you log into. If not Microsoft Office 365, Intuit's doing the same thing. QuickBooks in the cloud now. How many services are you logging into a cloud type of an interface? And a lot of people think the cloud is a magical place, like a fairy dust and unicorns where all IT problems are solved. But that's not true. The cloud is just someone else's computer. I promise you, there's a physical box with a hard drive in it that's sitting in a rack somewhere. That's what you think of when you think of the cloud. And so Microsoft Office 365 is a bunch of software running on a bunch of hardware. And in the cloud, it's possible for that hardware to fail. Things go wrong. Microsoft got breached. There have been incidences where an employee who was charged with applying an update to a section of the network accidentally took the whole network offline rather than the section he was supposed to be working on. When that happened to Microsoft, they went down for a day and a half. And that entire time, they had to just struggle to rebuild services and turn things back on. So the whole thing went off in a click, but it took a day and a half to put it all back again. So just because you're paying Microsoft to hold your data doesn't mean that they're going to do a great job of it and that it's always going to be available to you. So they don't actually assume responsibility for securing or backing up your data. So I encourage you to read your terms of service closely because those things are your responsibility, not their responsibility. So if your computer launches a script that encrypts all the data, that Microsoft's not obligated to recover that for you out of your Office 365 environment. And a lot of people learned this lesson the hard way back in 2013 when encryption attacks began, because a lot of data from not just Microsoft, but Amazon Web Services and Google and all of the major cloud vendors, the people had their data encrypted and they turned to Microsoft and said, well, just put it back. And Microsoft said, well, put what back? Like, we don't back up your data, you back up your data. And so make sure that you're using strong, unique passwords, you're using multi-factor authentication, that you're updating the security settings, right? Microsoft has a ton of great security settings in Office 365 that they leave completely wrong. They default to being disabled. And so there are settings within your Office 365 environment that say things like block unsafe attachments. And so there's a security setting in your Office 365 environment that says block unsafe attachments, and it's turned off by default. And so there's a bunch of those. We usually find 30 to 40 of those in every Office 365 environment. So you have to do the hardening. You can't just start using Office 365 and believe that it's secure, because it's not. Then educate your employees on what safe cloud practices looks like, right? Password practices, being careful about what you click on. And we really recommend that, companies consider getting some outside evaluation. The truth is that, how do you know when you have a bunch of vulnerabilities? Well, you have to look. You don't know if you don't look. And the tools that do, pardon me, the tools that do that, um, are kind of complicated and expensive, and so it's usually best if you just find a company that specializes in this type of service, and have them take a look at your environment, do a scan, and come back with a list of the vulnerabilities and threats that are there. And then you have a roadmap, a game plan for mitigating those threats and managing, your exposure. And then moving to a managed detection and response kind of a solution as well. And that's like your upper level of protection. It's that detect column and respond column all in one, right? So we saw those columns on the NIST framework. They tended to be very empty, but there's a solution to that that we call MDR, Managed Detection and Response, another IT acronym. But what that means to the business person is, there's a sophisticated team of threat hunters that can be engaged. And if something goes wrong, they're always on the job, monitoring the activity, detecting when something's gone wrong, and then, participating as experts to manage the event and respond and get us out the other end in the best possible way. So that's what managed detection and response looks like. I know that's a lot, and I threw a lot out there, and I want to finish up with enough time for questions and answers. So I'm going to finish up right here and toss it back to Rebecca and let them talk a little about, what we can do from here.
I think I'm actually going to toss it to Dave and let him
Okay.
speak for a little bit. Thanks, Elmer.
You bet.
Yes, thank you, Elmer. Excuse me. So a lot of what Elmer had talked to from a security perspective, we can help any of your businesses protect you guys and fill in some of the blanks on any of your NIST assessment. These are some of the benefits of partnering with a technology managed service provider such as ourselves. Predictable costs, end user productivity, as well as vulnerability management, right? So some of the patching and updates that Elmer was talking to. And then Rebecca, if you want to jump to the next slide. In the interest of time here, I want to open it up if anybody has any questions, and to answer the one regarding the recording. Yes, we are recording this, and we are happy to send this to participants for future playback. We're also offering a free ebook if you guys want to scan the QR code to the left. Again, we encourage you guys to reach out to us if you guys have questions regarding your own environment and your own security. We'd love to dive deeper and answer any specific relevant questions that pertain to your IT security. And I'm not seeing any questions. I think, Elmer, you scared everybody. If there's no questions, we greatly appreciate you guys attending. We appreciate your time. Thank you guys for listening. Please make sure you click on the get the QR code, grab your free ebook. And anybody that's interested in services, there is a exclusive offer for the time that you've taken to attend.
I would throw out there as well that if a question comes to mind after we log off, feel free to email us, and we'll be glad to get back to you with an answer.
Okay. Well, I Not seeing any questions. We appreciate your time. Hope everybody has a great afternoon. Thank you all.